Today's list is one where all things historical become increasingly hysterical. And I don't necessarily mean in the funny way. I have a variety of stories to keep you entertained, while making you more than a little paranoid at the same time. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 outrageous mass hysteria events throughout history. But before we begin, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe with that notification bell, as it truly helps the channel. And also, let us know what other history topics you'd like to see next. With all that said, let's go. 25. Mattoon Phantom Anesthetist Scare. In August 1944, the city of Mattoon, Illinois, experienced a series of terrifying attacks. Or did it? The so-called mad gasser of Mattoon seemed quite real back then. Victims recalled being sick and even paralyzed after inhaling a mysterious sweet-smelling gas. Making things even creepier was the presence of a strange figure, the mad gasser himself, who wore dark clothing and a cap. Other descriptions included a spray gun, and the figure may have also been female and wearing heels. Opinion varied over who exactly this individual was, but the real question is, did they ever exist in the first place? Were they a local chemist up to no good? Did the fact a war was going on at the same time make people paranoid? I guess we'll never know. Maybe the Phantom Anesthetist is still out there somewhere. 24. Portuguese Morangos com Açúcar. Viruses spread through stuff like coughs, sneezes, and human contact. But the Morangos com Açúcar virus found a new and alarming way to pass itself along. Large groups of Portuguese students became ill, with a rash and breathing difficulties. The 2006 story grabbed attention as the country's Institute for Medical Emergency got involved. So, what was the root cause of this emergency? A soap opera. No, I'm serious. Morangos com Açúcar is a teen drama that was so powerful it convinced hundreds of kids that they were sick after featuring a fictional virus storyline. Not only outrageous, but great publicity for the show, I'd have thought. 23. Delhi Monkey Man Panic. Monkey attacks aren't unusual in Delhi, India. However, the Monkey Man took things to the next level. This was a 4-foot hybrid creature who appears to have terrorized unsuspecting people in May 2001. The humanoid attacker had red eyes and claws, plus he wore a metal helmet. That was probably to protect him in case he fell over on his roller skates. Yes, some reported seeing him wear a pair of skates, and it gets wilder, with tails of sparks flying out of his chest. The assaults occurred at night, with people suffering bites and scratches. Neighborhood Watch went into overdrive trying to catch the menace. Hundreds of victims claimed to have seen the Monkey Man, though ultimately he was never found. Could he have been a regular monkey, or was it all in people's imaginations? Authorities state the injuries reported were accidental and caused by the people themselves, in a lot of cases. 22. Alien Face Scratcher. Imagine being asleep in bed when out of nowhere someone, or something, scratches your face. Is it a crazy burglar or an animal who got in through the window? Not according to residents of the North Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, who back in 2002 reported a wave of home invasions by a hostile alien. The alien face scratcher looked like a human, but it seemingly came from another world. It either glowed or had a large head, which was kind of like a light bulb. In fact, some thought it was a robot. What exactly was this thing that caused statewide panic? We never got to find out. Stories that it focused its fury on women and children, also that it killed people, were never proved. The alien face scratcher roamed the land against a backdrop of nighttime power cuts and high levels of darkness, which probably generated the sense of mass hysteria. 21. The Great Fear. The French Revolution of the late 18th century was a turbulent time, to say the least, which was made even more intense by an event called the Great Fear. In the heat of summer, following the iconic fall of the Bastille, peasants in rural areas became paranoid. The workers had overthrown the royal family, but still doubts lingered. Stories started circulating saying that King Louis XVI had an ace up his sleeve. Or rather, a team of mercenaries that were going to visit the peasants and make them pay for their lack of respect. This never happened, with the hysteria thought to have been caused by poor lines of communication and a general mood of anxiety. Understandable, given the nation had experienced a violent and radical shift in power. 20. Edison star panic. This sounds like a UFO story, but it's actually a little weirder than that. When Americans in the late 1890s saw objects lighting up in the sky, they blamed one man, Thomas Edison. The electrical pioneer helped change the face of the country through his work with electricity, meaning when humming, cigar-like airships appeared over people's heads, they figured Edison was up to something. Specifically, that he'd invented a flying machine called the Edison star, which had been mentioned in the press. Remember, this was a time when electricity was fairly new. Not many people understood how it was going to alter people's lives, and they were scared. The mystery airships passed into legend, and as for Edison, he strongly denied any involvement. 19. Hindu milk miracle. Do you believe a statue can drink milk? This was the extraordinary story coming out of New Delhi in late 1995. The strange phenomenon involved people offering bowls of milk to statues of divine figures, such as the god Ganesha. According to those who witnessed the dairy-based miracle, these religious statues would drain some of the milk from the bowl or spoon, noticeably making the level drop. Ganesha represents wisdom and good luck, among other qualities, and it turns out he was pretty thirsty. 18. June bug outbreak. In 1962, a group of factory workers in Lancaster, South Carolina experienced an itchy rash, not to mention nausea and vomiting. The workers claimed the place was infested with June bugs, which had bitten them and caused them to be sick. Trouble was, when the higher-ups investigated, they couldn't find a single bug. Interestingly, June bugs don't really bite humans anyway. The worst they could do is give you a little pinch with their jaws. So once it was established there were no bugs, the problem stopped, right? Nope. In fact, more and more people were affected, to the extent that they had to go to the hospital. It's believed this was a case of mass hysteria, and the workers suffered from a psychogenic phenomenon that only existed in their mind. 17. The headhunting panic. A massively disturbing rumor began circulating in Malaysia in colonial times. People lost their minds with worry. And why? Because they feared they'd lose their entire head. The story went that colonialists needed several noggins to use in building projects. Tribal headhunters were at large and they were looking for heads, whether the owner was using it or not. It sounds insane, right? A bridge or other structure strengthened by human heads and blood? However, these ideas were very important to the people there, and the rumors tied into those beliefs. The situation was described to the public by Sultan Syahrir, the first prime minister of Indonesia, and amazingly, it wasn't an uncommon story at the time. 16. Loudun, possession hysteria. Nuns are usually quiet people, but this wasn't the case in 17th century France. A mass possession is said to have happened at the Ursuline convent in the town of Loudun. Demons descended on the holy women, with the first victim being prioress Sister Jeanne d'Ange. This powerful event made a big impression on the French religious establishment, though what caused it is unknown. All we know is the hysteria focused on Father Urbain Grandier. He was believed to be controlling the demons, though no solid evidence exists. Could it be something to do with the fact that Father Grandier opposed corruption in the church and went up against Cardinal Richelieu? Yes, there was a real Cardinal Richelieu, who you may recognize from the story of the Three Musketeers. This was a heavily fictionalized version, though he might have played the villain in real life and had Grandier accused of demonic possession. 15. Cathedral fainting epidemic. It makes sense that you'd feel lightheaded if you had to stand in the crowded room for a long time. You'd feel even worse if it was hot in there, and you were only a little kid. You might even faint, which is exactly what happened to one child attending a service at Blackburn Cathedral in 1986. A girl who was part of a visiting school party passed out, but no one anticipated what happened next. There was a domino effect, where other children fainted until dozens were on the ground. This surprised and alarmed the adults, who it seems were witnessing a major psychogenic reaction. Thankfully, there didn't appear to be any serious consequences from the hysteria. 14. Pregnancy panic. Imagine being in a hospital and feeling pregnant, only you weren't. This is a powerful delusion which can pass between different people through suggestion. The medical name for it is pseudocyesis, or false pregnancy. There are documented cases where a patient can become convinced she has a baby in her abdomen, which is moving. Despite doctors not being able to find any trace of pregnancy, the woman still believes she's pregnant. What's more, the panic can kind of spread, with other female patients claiming to have babies inside them. It's believed to be partly brought on by serious emotional stress. 13. Twitching epidemic. In 1939, a girls' school in South Louisiana was rocked by an epidemic of extreme twitching. Symptoms included involuntary jerking, spasms, shaking, and losing consciousness. It happened across a number of weeks to a group of students, and the disturbing situation was made worse by the fact it couldn't be definitively explained. Outside of mass hysteria, it just wasn't clear how everyone had been so affected so badly. The first case involved a girl who may have started twitching when seeing her ex-boyfriend dancing with another girl. Whatever triggered the epidemic, it led to about 300 students dropping out of the school, according to reports. 12. Milan plague poison. If a city experiencing a deadly plague isn't bad enough, there was a nasty twist which led to people being tortured and killed. As the Great Plague was raging through Milan in 1630, a mass panic happened. This was to do with the infection, of course, but also what or who might be spreading it. An idea spread that the devil was deliberately inflicting the plague on people. He was doing this through people called untori, or anointers, who carried poison and targeted unsuspecting citizens. The rush to identify these alleged anointers was driven by panic, and the outcome was brutal. This witch hunt resulted in horrifying cases of persecution. Shockingly, anointers were connected to stains on the walls of buildings, meaning anyone with this feature was liable to be attacked or viciously interrogated by the authorities. 11. The Bin Laden Itch. One particularly powerful story of mass hysteria occurred in the wakes of the attack on September 11, 2001. American elementary and middle schools were processing the scale of the tragedy in New York, and there was another potential threat also. Anthrax was being sent in the post to prominent figures and organizations. When students and teachers had anything like a rash, itching, or burning on their skin, they naturally became worried it was linked to these communications. The condition became known as Bin Laden Itch. However, it didn't look like Bin Laden was attacking schools. It was only a psychological response to the trauma, which was so strong it manifested as physical symptoms. 10. Wiener Fever. The late 60s saw a wave of what can only be described as panic rock the male population of Singapore. Why were they panicking? Well, when they checked out their manhood, it seemed like their manhood was checking out, by which I mean it retreated into their body. And before any men out there start getting stressed, I should say this is an illusion. There is such a thing, so to speak, as Coro syndrome, and part of that is believing your penis is bailing on you. What is dangerous, however, is the psychological impact of thinking this bizarre thought. It can lead to people injuring themselves whilst trying to remedy the situation, plus experiencing a heck of a lot of stress that in itself can be fatal. 9. The affair of the poisons. Aristocrats have it all. Money, power, big houses. Nothing bad ever happens to them, does it? Well, it did in late 17th century France, where the court of King Louis XIV was rocked by the affair of the poisons. It turned out the upper classes in French society had access to magicians and fortune tellers, one of which was Catherine Mauvaison, also known as La Voisin. One of the things they did was supply poison to wealthy clients, who presumably wanted people they didn't like bumped off. The magical whacking was only one side of the business, with traders such as La Voisin also providing love potions and other services you can't find in the mortal realm. The affair of the poisons blew the lid off of these secret activities, with authorities uncovering the true scale of this bizarre and dangerous network. As for La Voisin, she was tried for her crimes and executed by being burned at the stake. 8. Kosovo mystery illness. When children began feeling sick and dizzy at a school in Kosovo, teachers and parents were concerned. They also complained of breathlessness, muscle weakness, and fainting. Because this was 1990, and Kosovo was part of the war-torn former Yugoslavia, it created fear and paranoia in the community. Could it be the mass illness was caused by contamination, either through poisoned food or tainted water supply? The possibility of that was convincing, though what actually was happening was a case of mass hysteria. It's been described as a sociogenic illness, one created by intense social conditioning. 7. New England vampire scare. Did you know there's a connection between tuberculosis and vampires? No, not an actual one, but it's a crazy story anyway. In 19th century New England, the effects of the disease made people think a blood drinker was preying on the population. How on earth did they come to this conclusion? Strangely, it was believed to be a family affair, as in a deceased member with fangs was taking the life essence from their relatives. In reality, it was the tuberculosis infection working its way through the bloodline, rather than a Dracula-style curse. These weren't the enlightened times we live in today. People feared superstitious traditions, plus they had a total lack of understanding of TB. You get it from a sneeze or a cough, not a bite on the neck. 6. Halifax slasher hoax. You may think stories about slashers started with horror movies of the 1970s, but you're wrong. There's an older case of a slasher going back to 1938. The West Yorkshire city of Halifax is a long way from the US suburbs of John Carpenter's Halloween, but they had their own version of Michael Myers on the prowl. A mysterious figure was reportedly cutting people with some kind of sharp object, and locals got scared. People were wrongly accused of the crimes by a hysterical population who turned vigilante and nearly lynched an innocent man over it. So who was the Halifax slasher as they came to be known? Nobody. The so-called victims had in fact cut themselves, and the idea of a rogue psychopath on the attack was exposed as mass hysteria. 5. Yellow rain. Did America's enemies in the Vietnam War use a form of chemical attack dubbed yellow rain? That was the charge leveled at the Laotian and Vietnamese army, following reports from the Hmong people. They described a yellow substance that came from the sky and caused burns and breathing difficulties, among other dramatic symptoms. It became one of the strangest chapters of the war, which lasted between the mid-50s and mid-70s. The conflict went on so long it became unpopular with the American public. This sense of unease continued into the 80s when movies critical of the war were made, such as Platoon. It turned out there was no solid evidence of yellow rain being used. An investigation in that decade couldn't prove the existence of yellow rain as a weapon. While American experts figured the Soviets had come up with it, others speculated on what this yellow stuff might have been. If it wasn't chemical warfare, then what was it? 4. The Hammersmith Ghost. In 1803, the area of London known as Hammersmith was in the grip of terror. Tales of a white ghost roaming the streets made people fearful and aggressive. According to reports, the specter had an unnerving habit of either pointing at someone or chasing them. So, what was the truth behind this scary story? The Hammersmith Ghost was never found. However, the hysteria that took hold of the community would result in a heartbreaking tragedy. A man called Francis Smith actually went out with a firearm determined to bring down the ghost once and for all. Unfortunately, a bricklayer in a white outfit named Thomas Millwood was returning home the very same night. When Smith caught sight of Millwood, he became confused and shot him, inflicting a fatal wound. There followed a landmark legal case where Smith was convicted of murder, then pardoned by the king and given a verdict of manslaughter. Before this trial, the fact someone could mistakenly commit a crime in response to mass hysteria hadn't been considered. This story changed the game, and eventually the British legal system, forever. 3. Irish Fright. There was a time in history when England and Wales feared a major attack by Irish troops. This hysteria was in the air. It was in the late 17th century, in the time of the Glorious Revolution, where James II faced his downfall at the hands of the Protestants. When rumors started about an Irish Fright where Catholic aggressors would take their revenge for the deposing of the king, people treated them seriously. A large-scale panic seized the population, with fears their villages were going to be burned to the ground. Was this true? Not really. It was more a case of anti-James propaganda, though the effect was worryingly powerful. People were arming themselves and getting ready to take on any random Irish invaders. 2. all fall down. The Hollandwell incident is a major example of a mass hysteria event in Nottinghamshire, England. It happened during what should have been a happy occasion, the 1980 Hollandwell show. Among those gathered to celebrate were 300 schoolchildren. However, their day out would turn nasty when they all collapsed with nausea and dizziness. What's particularly intriguing about this story is that the official explanation of a psychological reaction is disputed by those who were involved. Initially, the all fall down event was thought to be due to poisoning of some kind. The local member of parliament, Dennis Skinner, stated that the kids had been discriminated against because they were working class. He believed the investigation would have been more thorough had the victims been wealthier. Hollandwell is a mining area, so a gas leak is one possible explanation. A pesticide used back then has also been highlighted as a potential cause. We still don't know exactly how the distressing event unfolded. 1. Ghost rocket. Were there really enemy rockets in the sky over Scandinavia in 1946? People living in quiet areas pointed out rocket-shaped objects traveling at speed over lakes and countryside. They certainly seem like rockets to the witnesses involved, who were a range of individuals, from farmers to Air Force personnel. Some of these ghost rockets are said to have crashed, though physical evidence has never been recovered. If this was a case of mass hysteria, what could have caused it? 1946 was the year after the end of the Second World War, so some believe that paranoia led to the strange sightings. However, the witnesses have been described as reliable, so maybe there really were things flying through the clouds. Once you consider that possibility, things get pretty outrageous. And that's all I have for you today. Have you ever been caught up in a mass hysteria event? Maybe you lived through some of these more recent stories on our list. If so, let us know in the comments. And in case you ever are involved in something like these, make sure you watch this video here first, 25 life hacks that could save your life in a catastrophe. And I'll see you soon for an all-new list. Bye.